You can make an animation look really impressive and high quality by adding camera movement, and the great thing is that you don't need an expensive program to do it. There are quite a few methods you can use, one of which is animating your background by hand. This is a great way to create an infinitely looping animation. Draw in the background element you want to be moving, ideally containing distinguishable sections that are the same type of object. Now the goal is to make each of these chunks morph into the one directly next to it. In your second frame, draw what the in-between state of this morphing would look like. Be creative with how you make details and shapes appear, disappear, or change, and also don't forget to include a new chunk starting to appear at the beginning of the chain, as well as leaving view at the end. As you then fill in the gaps with more frames to make the movement smoother, keep in mind the directions these objects should be traveling in, and be careful to not have it move backwards at any point. I have my next frame shown in red, so I always know to make my object move towards the red. This isn't an ideal option if you're wanting to have a very detailed background, but it is great if you want this hand-drawn style, and you don't need a very fancy program to pull it off. The next option is more common, and that is zooming or panning around your scene with either a camera tool, or sliding and scaling the objects themselves with keyframes. Whichever option, the basic idea of it is that you make a keyframe on a timeline with the scene position to where you want the camera motion to begin. Then move further down the timeline and make a new keyframe, changing the position to where you want the camera motion to end. Then the program fills in the gaps and makes it move smoothly from the first keyframe to the next. Not every animation program will have this as a feature, so if that's the case for yours, you may need to bring your animation into another program after the drawing part is done. After Effects is the most standard, professional option for piecing together and doing camera work for your animations, but most video editors, including some free ones, should also have what you need. I used one called OpenShot here as an example. It's pretty limited, but still allows you to move an image around with keyframes. After getting the basic motion in, the next step is making your camera movement feel realistic with details like slowing to a stop at the end of a pan. You should think of your camera as like a real camera. It can't just start moving fast without picking up speed first, and can't stop suddenly without slowing down. It's the same slow in, slow out principle that you should be applying to the visible stuff in your animation as well. Taking this method further, instead of having everything on the same layer, you can make your scene feel more real and less like a flat image by separating the elements based on distance. Now you can parallax, creating the effect where further things appear to move slower than closer things. If you're doing your camera movement in a second program, you'll of course need to have all of these elements exported as PNGs, including the animation itself. See if you have the option to export your animation as a PNG sequence, which will, like it sounds, give you each of your frames as individual ordered images. Then you can look for an option to import the images as a sequence into your editing program, and this should give you your animation as a sort of transparent video that you can drag into your scene. For anyone working on a mobile device, things such as exporting and importing your frames like this probably won't be an option, in which case you kind of just need to be creative and do your best with what you have. The most complex, fancy thing you can try is making your camera move around in 3D space. Blender is primarily designed for 3D animation, but is actually a pretty incredible program for 2D as well, especially considering it's free. There's more than one way to create a scene for 2D animation, so I'll just sum up the most simple, beginner-friendly method here, and then I'll have some 2D Blender tutorials that I like linked below for anyone interested. I want to create a new environment for this walking creature, and I've started by creating some assets that can be pieced together, like a ground surface, sky background, and various objects to place around my environment. Now in Blender, I go to Add, Image, Mesh Plane, and then import my assets with the shader option set to shaderless. Now I move, scale, and rotate everything around to build my environment, and as I do, I frequently check how it looks through the view of the camera. Animating the camera is done with keyframes, the same basic idea as any other program. If you have this button clicked on, anything you move will automatically make a keyframe. Now I have a finished moving background. These two animations are cool to compare because even though the idea of them is the same, the different ways they were made resulted in completely different styles. Keep in mind that if you're using this Blender method and you want your camera to rotate around the scene, the flat flatness of your objects becomes much more obvious and doesn't look great. For more freedom with your camera angles, you'll need to do something fancier. So now I've talked a lot about different methods for getting your camera to move, but not as much any ideas for how to use it to effectively improve the look and feel of your animations. When you have an action taking place that you want to feel more punchy or lively, one thing to try is following the movement with the camera. In this case, I've made the camera pan to the right as the character steps in that direction, then it follows the kick upward before going back as they go back. Compared to the version without camera movement, the kick feels much more dramatic of an action. A shake effect is useful for either when something moves past quickly near the camera, or if you want to make something like a punch or explosion feel more impactful. This is something you can add as an already existing effect in your program, or create the effect manually with a few closely spaced keyframes. Here are some videos that might help you with creating environments for your animations. Thanks for watching!